This report seeks to answer questions about how a child sex offender got away with his offending for decades in Victorian railway groups and Puffing Billy. Robert Whitehead was convicted of child sex offences in 2015 for conduct going back to the 1960s. He died in prison later that year. He had been convicted of offences against children in 1959. Yet he was allowed to be involved for decades with the railways, where he had access to countless innocent young volunteers. We do not know and will never know how many he abused. Puffing Billy is a Victorian icon, usually thought of with nostalgic delight. But for a group of boys abused by trusted adult volunteers, the railway shaped their lives in a very different way. Our investigation spanned many years of records to try to find out who knew what, when. How was it possible that Whitehead had such access to children for some 30 years? Why was he allowed to supervise children's overnight working parties? How did he have leases on railway property where some of his offending occurred? Why were he and another volunteer responsible for the screening of volunteers? And how was he allowed to oversee the storage of complaints? The victims' voices paint a heartbreaking picture. Boys telling Puffing Billy management about sexual abuse, which was not reported to police. A mother trying to warn Puffing Billy, whose integrity was called into question because there was no record of her calls. Their stories are finally validated. Whitehead was a lifelong offender whose abuse was facilitated by the wilful blindness, indifference or ineptitude of a succession of organisations, from Victorian Railways to Puffing Billy. Double standards prevailed for decades. Puffing Billy reported minor thefts to the police, but not allegations of child sex abuse. A board member warned his 10-year-old son about Whitehead, but not other boys. A victim was shut out, while his perpetrators remained. Time and time again, organisations protected their own reputations at the expense of victims. The actions and inaction of people in authority is inexcusable. I commend the courage and persistence of the survivors who sought answers. Nothing can compensate for the trauma and loss of innocence experienced by victims and survivors. But at the least they deserve a public apology that may help to provide vindication and closure. I am pleased the Victorian Government has begun implementing the recommendations for redress. This is an indelible stain on too many childhoods.